Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another Thunderpop Live. I actually don't remember what episode number we're on, so we'll just kind of edit that in later. But we're back with another Thunderpop Live, and on this episode, coming up on
Thunderpop,
as that announcer just said, that button that I pushed just announced, coming up on this episode that I don't remember the number of. We're going to do our usual tropes. We got a Thunder Take coming up. On that Thunder Take, I'm going to talk about something we probably have never talked about on this podcast. Sesame Street. Watching Sesame Street with my guest over here to this side. Probably has some experience with Sesame Street. Yeah. Laura Bennett, ladies and gentlemen, going to be joining me from the Music, Medicine, and Machines podcast. And I've been a guest on her show, and now she's coming over to be a guest on this show. So thank you for coming on. I have some applause somewhere for you. We'll track it down. Actually, right here. Here's the sound for you. Or I can give you some funny polka music if I can't find my actual applause. We have it here.
I like the polka sounds.
Yeah. And we have the polka sounds too, so we can come back to polka sounds here in a little bit. But we're gonna cover Sesame Street on the Thunder Take. Watching it today with my 3.5-year-old. He's getting really into it, as many 3.5-year-olds do, and I'm glad he's getting into it. There's some good content in Sesame Street, and it's been around forever, so it's sort of a family tradition, kind of handing it down now to the next generation. But it's a little different now, I've noticed. And I want to point out something I noticed in the opening intro. I'm obsessed with opening intros of shows. I've always been obsessed with theme music, opening intros. So we'll cover that. I'm going to talk about that in the Thunder Take. Our main topic, though, is the best of Netflix 2020. And that's what we're going to be covering. And we've going to cover Unsolved Mysteries. We're going to get into The Social Dilemma, which was probably one of the most talked about was the most talked about documentary of 2020 until the Cuties documentary debuted on Netflix. Netflix is becoming kind of the place for controversial and most talked about documentaries. I think it's becoming the destination for that. Also, stand-up comedy specials. They're pretty big with stand-up comedy now, and they're kind of becoming their MO. But we're going to cover the best of Netflix, maybe also the worst of Netflix 2020 as well. But we're going to cover that. We'll have our other usual tropes, agree or disagree, where we'll cover some things like the Pink Panther being rebooted, and Star Trek, which Laura will appreciate, being a big Star Trek fan. That we're gonna get into a little Star Trek nerdiness, and then we'll have some other stuff. Thoughts and advice. Kind of a surprise for thoughts and advice. I warned Laura. I said, thoughts and advice can go off the rails sometimes, so she's been warned, and she still showed up. So that. And then we'll have our intro, which is going to be this. Speaking of intros and being obsessed with intros.
Thunderpop. It's time for Thunderpop. Don't make me say it again. Thunderpop. 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 I will not say it again. Okay, I lied. Thunderpop. 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 Oh, Thunderpop.
Yeah. And here we are for the episode that I don't remember the number of. And maybe if I get a second, I can look it up. Good grief. Bit of a juggling act here sometimes, especially lately, between, producing this podcast and other content for it, and having my 3.5-year-old still home from preschool. We're planning on him going back to school in March, but he's still home. So my wife's running her office here at the house. So it's quite a day here at the Presley residence. Okay, so we're going to get into the Thunder Take, and I set this up that we were going to talk Sesame Street. And by the way, we're going to get into Netflix after that. And Maureen Joseph, who's on our chat, said that they have also increased their subscriptions. She's over on Facebook tonight. By the way, Maureen Joseph's going to be joining me next week for an Instagram live. We're going to do an exclusive
Ooh.
Instagram live where we're going to talk about Wonder Woman 1984 going straight to HBO Max. It is going to get a theatrical release wherever it can be shown in theaters. And then wherever it cannot be shown, you'll still have the option to watch it, but it'll be on HBO Max streaming. And by the way, that's another subscription, $14.99 if you want to watch that. Now, if you think about it, you spend about that much money probably for a night out for one person at a movie, not including your snacks and drink. Then you would get up to, $25, $30, maybe $35. So, or more. It's been a while since I've been at the movie theater. Maybe I'm losing touch with how much it cost when we did still go to movie theaters. But HBO Max, $14.99 if you really want to watch Wonder Woman 1984, which I really want to watch it. I'm a huge fan. I would say, okay, if you want to subscribe for a month just to watch Wonder Woman 1984, as long as you remember to cancel your subscription before January, before the next month comes around, the next cycle, binge watch as much stuff as you want to binge watch on there. And then just remember to cancel it. Do you ever do this? There's so many streaming platforms now. Laura, do you juggle and kind of like, I know people that do this. They'll have a kind of a thing where they'll binge watch everything that's on Netflix, and then once they're done with Netflix, they cancel their subscription and they hop over to Hulu or CBS All Access, and then they binge watch everything on there for a couple months. So that way they're not paying for multiple, because there's a lot of them now.
Well, I actually thought I wasn't getting all of my bang for my buck out of Amazon Prime Access, so I started binge watching Star Trek movies. And I started at the very beginning, and I was starting to work my way up. But that's true. I with Netflix, I do cancel it at times if we're not watching it. My daughter got really into her iPad, so I canceled it. And then this morning she was telling me she wanted it again. I'm like, well, honey, you're watching your iPad lately, so I don't feel a huge need to get it.
Yeah. If you've watched everything on there, and right now, the content is still coming out, but I think there's going to be a point where they're going to have to get more creative because of the production being shut down for a while. They'll turn to reality shows, stuff that can be produced in a real short window of time. Animation was pretty easy to still continue to produce, even while production and social distancing was happening and production was shut down. So there's that. They'll have for the fans of the show, and there are many fans of the show, Cobra Kai will be back with a third season in January. So if people have binge watched everything there is to binge watch on Netflix, they'll have that coming down the wire at the beginning of the year. So yeah, Star Trek binge watching's fun, watching all those movies and kind of getting caught up with those. So Sesame Street, speaking of subscriptions, and Sesame Street, it was very controversial. I think this happened about 2010 that it was announced that Sesame Street was going to start being new episodes of Sesame Street would be produced and aired on HBO's platform. And it was a big controversy. A lot of people were upset because it's a paid cable premium service. And also now that they have HBO Max that's been added to that, you can include that as a part of another way you could watch Sesame Street, new episodes of Sesame Street. Now, the deal is that they still go to PBS, but after a year after they originally air on HBO, they're reran on PBS. And I don't know about you, but my kid doesn't notice the difference if they're old episodes that were produced a year before. So for me, it's not that big a deal. But one of the things, another big deal with them going when they started producing the shows at HBO is that they were going to be able to have bigger productions, like in terms of more money kind of pumped into it. It was also mentioned that one of the reasons they had to do it was survival, making the deal with HBO, because back in the 90s, when even in the 2000s, the early 2000s, when VHS and DVD were king, there was a huge revenue stream there for Sesame Street, where they were making a lot of revenue on VHS and DVD sales and rental. So they had whatever they had from PBS, whatever they would get from PBS for being on PBS, on public broadcasting, but then they were making a huge sum of money from the DVD. But as DVD sales have dwindled and become less prominent, Sesame Street was missing that extra revenue, and that's why that HBO deal was made, was to make up for that lost revenue and be able to keep the quality of the production up. But I watched it today. We hadn't watched it in a while. Me and my son watched it a little bit several months ago, and then we put it back on today, and he was really into it. So he's loving the Elmo, as 3.5-year-olds do. Do you watch the Sesame Street, Laura, at your house?
No, we don't, because it really depends on the area. And I was exploring this too, because I think as kids, you and I, we grew up watching Sesame Street. We grew up watching Mr. Rogers. So you're getting certain values instilled at such a young age. I think, people don't think how impressionable TV can be. But, I remember watching those shows and having a huge impact on the way I thought. So my daughter doesn't have easy access to it. I have to download the app, and then she can watch it on her app. And I mean, I don't want her sitting on my phone watching an educational show any more than she's on her tablet watching YouTube videos about Legos.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I get it. I totally get that. But anyway, we watched it today. We were watching it on our, we have a Roku. So I was with him. We had it plugged in, and we were watching it on the TV in the living room. And it was a fun thing for us to do together, sit there and watch it and talk about it, and then laugh at some of the stuff that he was laughing at with Elmo. That was funny. Good comedy, by the way. It was very funny. But when the opening comes on, I'm like, good grief. I mean, it's like a Hollywood big budget movie production now. And I'm like, have they become just a little bit too slick? That's my thunder take today. I'm worried that Sesame Street maybe has become just a little bit too slick, a little bit too glossy. I miss the old days of the more kind of the I don't want to call it grungy Sesame Street, but it was sort of a little bit more organic and a little bit more low key. I mean, maybe I'm just the old man just kind of griping about, these modern things. But let me show you the opening a little bit here. I don't know if you've seen it, but check it out. It's a little glossy.
I haven't.
Okay, I'm gonna put the hold on here. Okay, we're gonna go share this with the audience, and there. Okay, sunny day. I had the music turned down because I don't want to get into any, like the copyright issue. But okay, check it out. Okay, look at this. See Grover landing in the background, slow motion special effects. I mean, this is like Matrix kind of stuff. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. And I'm going to rewind on some of this so you can see some of this stuff. Okay. Okay, there's the bubbles. That's fine. The bubble pops. Okay, look at that. Slow motion. This is like Matrix on Sesame Street with the slow motion effects. And then there's the cookies in the air smashing and crumbling. And okay, there's the Grover in the background. You saw the superhero Grover landing in the background. It's like he's in the middle of an action movie, like photobombing Sesame Street. Okay, so there it is. There's the ramped up glossy version of Sesame Street's opening, and I'm like, this is glitzy. This is glossy. This is big budget Hollywood. So I think this is kind of HBO's influence on Sesame Street. Now,
you're probably right.
Am I wrong, or am I right, or am I wrong? Am I making too big of a deal out of this?
Well, it actually looks like they're combing Elmo's fur hair. I mean, did you see it? He's all like slicked back,
No,
and yeah. And I think back in the olden days, he was a little more furry looking.
Uh-huh. We got some people coming in with comments. We're gonna jump on that towards the end of the show and do kind of a little thing with comments. We got a lot of people making some comments about the show, and we really appreciate you coming in and watching. Some of our friends we have people on Twitch right now watching. We have people on Facebook. So great. We have a few trolls on too right now. So yeah. So that's why I looked over for a second. I was slightly distracted by a few of the comments. That's the internet is going to be internet.
Internet is interneting.
The internet, exactly. The internet is interneting. But hey, we know what we signed up for when we're here. Okay, now we're gonna get into the topic. So a little bit slick back on the Elmo hair. So you might agree with me a little bit. Before I move on, I was clarify. You agree with me a little bit on this?
Yeah, I definitely do.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get into Netflix, the best of Netflix 2020. And I hate to even use the 2020 on the end of that with the best stuff. And YouTube's not even gonna do a best of compilation this year. They usually do like their YouTube version of the best of. But they're they're out this year, and that makes total. They used to have those Barbara Walters specials too. The Barbara Walters would do the best of the year, and YouTube has their own version of that. But no, it's not going to happen this year. I think you just do the worst of maybe, or the worst of the worst. But that's
I
about
would agree with that. Yeah, let's
Yeah.
just talk about how crappy 2020 was.
Yeah, you could go. Yeah, exactly. That's all you can really do when you get into a compilation about 2020. But one thing we did do a lot of in 2020 is we stayed home and we binge watched shows. We watched a lot of Netflix. There certainly wasn't a whole lot to go out and do. There was a little bit, but not a lot. So here it is. Netflix 2020, great documentaries. We were talking about that earlier. Cobra Kai came over to Netflix, and a lot of people that had missed it when it was over on YouTube discovered it and found it to be quite fun and enjoyable. Netflix had hit documentaries. They had stand-up comedy in the middle of a pandemic. Dave Chappelle doing stand-up comedy outdoors, socially distanced at a park. They did a couple of those specials. Very creative. They just dropped a new one this week with Kevin Hart, where supposedly he's doing the stand-up comedy from his house.
Hmm.
And he's in his pajamas in the special, and people are wearing masks, and it's a small audience. It's a very small, could be just like his family and close friends. But they're all wearing masks, and they're all kind of distanced out from each other. It does look like it could be his living room, kind of like decorated a little bit, but so another creative. So people are being creative. They're figuring out ways to still get content out there in the middle of a pandemic. Documentaries, though, huge on Netflix. And one of them, a doc series that kind of delivers everything you want in great Netflix content. It brings nostalgia, because Unsolved Mysteries, who doesn't who can't remember that from growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, the theme song, the little mystery theme song coming in. Unsolved Mysteries was great. And then all of a sudden, just when you need it most, in the middle of a pandemic, to kind of take us away from the drama that we have in the real world to the drama that was in that other part of the real world. Unsolved Mysteries, great for binge watching, great for taking you to a different place and kind of being armchair detective. So you big fan of the show, correct?
Yeah, I actually grew up watching the show. I mean, it was running from 1987 to 2010, and I just loved it. I mean, they covered everything. They covered aliens, ghosts, missing person cases, murder. They even covered the Tupac Shakur story. That's where I first heard about Tupac Shakur being basically assassinated. So, when they brought it back and the opening intro, and they kind of have that image of, Robert Stack kind of coming through the lettering, it just really hit home for me. I was like, that is such a great tribute to him. It's the only intro that I watch on Netflix. All the others I just skip through.
Wow. Yeah. Show's a little bit different now. They don't have the host. They have the music. It's a little bit more, I guess we'd say clean, kind of more like a tighter, cleaner version, or like modernized version of it. Less of, you don't have a host. I don't think there's even a narrator, if I'm not mistaken.
No, and I don't think there is. And think about it. Robert Stack is such an icon for that show. I mean, he really was part of the brand. Show up in his trench coat. He's got his bushy eyebrows, kind of looking down, and his deep baritone, bassy voice. And I don't think they could repeat that. But they pay homage to him in the intro. You know.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I kept waiting for it too when I watched the first one. I was like, they're gonna do something in there, Robert Stack. They got to do something, right? A
Right.
little nugget, like maybe we'll see his reflection in a window in the background. I mean, something. I mean, and they did. They gave us just enough of that for the people that grew up watching the show, uh, and wanted to see a little bit of that nostalgia. We get the music, of course, which is great. You got to have that theme song, so I'm glad they brought that back. The intro has some similarities to the original, but the show is just so well done, edited so well. It really grabs you, pulls you in. They're so good at mining for the best cold cases and mysteries, and being able to do. I mean, you look at what they do compared to we used to watch those Unsolved Mysteries on 2020, and those are great. Those are great, but they're not like this kind of great. Like Unsolved Mysteries, great. I mean, that's a whole new another level. So I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you specifically about the one that's regional to you. You being in the Maryland area, near Baltimore,
Mhm.
and having kind of some firsthand knowledge of the one that was on the first episode. This was the one from the first episode of the new episodes on Netflix, the Rivera Case.
Well, season one, actually. So, if people are catching up, this is a great story to dive into. I mean, it's just, it has a lot of mystery about it. So the story starts that Ray and his wife were
Oh, and by
going
the
to
way, I'm
eventually.
going to set up spoiler alert. If you haven't seen it and you don't want it spoiled, this would be might dial us out for the moment, but come back
Right.
later. We'll get into other stuff, but yeah, absolutely. Just wanted to let people know, put that disclaimer out there.
No, that's appropriate. So, he and his wife were going to move to Baltimore for a short-term writing gig, and the company was Stansberry and Research, and it's a popular publishing company in Baltimore. They also have a couple other companies. The other one is Agora Publishing, and actually, when I was in between two jobs, when I was going to transfer to my, like kind of like my DC career, I actually applied for a marketing job at Stansberry Research around the time that Ray was working there.
Wow.
In that time frame. I actually knew somebody that worked there in the time frame of Ray being there and then him having his subsequent mysterious death. I came across their publications. They wrote these really cheesy newsletters about stocks and finance and the world is ending kind of doom. That's the marketing that they really played upon, was the fear of their investors. And then I thought, this is just too hokey for me. Even though I applied, it still just seemed too hokey for me. So I thought, that story really drew me in because, their house, they show a picture of the house. I know exactly where that is in Baltimore.
Really?
Like
Wow.
what street you need to drive down. I've been to the Belvedere. The Belvedere has a bar
I
called.
was going to ask you about the hotel. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's
there.
gorgeous. A friend of mine got married there, and you look like you're going into a palace. I mean, they have these huge floor to ceiling mirrors. They're lined with gold, and you feel like you're in a real ballroom. I mean, they don't really skimp on the entrance area into it, but it's condos, like they said. So you have the first floor, and then you have the bar, the Owl Bar, which is really cool layout. And then you go up to the 13th floor, and they would have like what do you call the music? Kind of like a Spanish band playing dancing music, and people would go up there. Bossa Nova, but kind of more of the upbeat, up-tempo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just bring people in, you do the dancing, and I always loved that. I loved
great. Yeah.
It is. You would love it. It's a lot of fun, provided when this whole hullabaloo kind of changes and we can go back out again. Yeah, but the story really kind of drew me in because it was very mysterious, right? Ray was edgy for a couple weeks before his death, if you recall, in the episode. He received, there was like these incidences where the alarms were going off outside their house. They had windows that were broken into. And then he got the call on the day of, and he just dashed out. And they had a roommate at the time, and she noted that. And so, you kind of come up with these theories, and then they go to try to interview the Stansberry Research Company and the friend in question who's linked to his death. and he puts a whole gag order on the entire company staff. So, that raises a lot of questions, and you just don't have a lot of answers. And even the Baltimore police, they were just like, this is a suicide, and they just kind of closed and shut it. I remember watching the series again, and prior to us having the live stream tonight, and that really struck me out, is how the police department handled it, especially in how they kind of pushed it to closure, and it just raised more questions, like why wouldn't they keep the case open? Because really his manner of death was just so, even though there was elements of suicide, like jumping off the building, going into that conference room, there's just so many details that made it seem more mysterious that it should have been left open.
Oh, yeah.
And the coroner, the way she said it was undetermined, was the legal way of saying that this is not solved yet. And that was the only leverage that person had. But the police just kind of pushed it to the side. And I thought that was a tragedy in itself.
Previous to Unsolved Mysteries coming back and then doing this story in their season 1, was this still in the news in your area? Like, would it still come up? Because we have a major, cold case in my city in Austin. A lot of people that are watching, that are from, they're locals that live in the same city as me, will know about the yogurt shop murders from the early 90s. And that is those, the teen girls that worked at a yogurt shop that were, brutally murdered. And they never solved that case, and they had made arrests. They've had people arrested and then freed and released because they didn't have enough evidence. There's a lot of conspiracy theories behind it. In fact, I would assume that at some point Unsolved Mysteries is going to cover the yogurt shop murders. I'm surprised they haven't yet. But very similar to this, in it being a cold case, it comes up in our news, local news from time to time. It's still a story from time to time. Was this still in the news there even before the Unsolved Mysteries kind of brought it back?
Well, I didn't really see anything around the time that the story happened. And
Yeah.
so when I saw Unsolved Mysteries, I was like, oh, wow, this happened in Baltimore. Why didn't I hear about this?
Mhm.
I think, when it happened, it was really hot and heavy in the news, and then it just was out of the limelight. So I think you got to think about the leverage that a company like Stansberry Research would have in Baltimore politically, because
Yeah.
you're dealing with a city that has a declining infrastructure. Only 500,000 people. And so there's going to be certain employers that dominate the area, like Johns Hopkins, Bayview, and then you have Stansberry Research, and they're kind of like co-companies. And, he had a building. Stansberry Research was like almost right next door to the Belvedere, right? And you're going up 6 or 8 floors. So obviously these guys have cash. And the people that have cash have leverage, especially the long-term running companies. I mean, he's been in Baltimore for close to 20 years now, and they've expanded their repertoire. I mean, after the series, I went back to YouTube and I started Googling them to see, what were they doing now? And they've updated their branding. They have like a new female host with blonde hair. She has her little panels. They do these like kind of like thoughtful hour-long conversations for their investors, where they'll drop these like tidbits of information.
Yeah.
Because with a story like this, you wonder how people or the companies thrive or shrivel up. And so I didn't really see a whole lot in the news. And Jane Miller, she's still on the news in the Baltimore area, and
Yeah.
she seems to be the best, the one with the most knowledge about the case. But we haven't really seen anything come to light again. I mean, consider how the police department dealt with it. They basically closed it. So if it's closed, there's no new news, even if there is new news.
Right. Usually I hate that sometimes with the news. Me and my wife were talking about that a recent, like in the last year, how there'll be these stories that'll come on the news, like something major that happens, and then you're wanting to follow up on it, and then there's never any more reporting on it ever again. Like it just sort of disappears, and you're wondering what's going on. Why? Like I want some like updates on some of these stories, and I guess I needed to get a newscaster on here to ask them the why on that. And sometimes it might be for privacy reasons, people that were involved in the case. Maybe it's legal reasons. So there may be a lot more to it than than we know. I don't know, but it's like putting out the album and having the first single just blows up, and then you're waiting for the follow-up single, and you don't get the follow-up single. So it's a lot like that with the news sometimes. Um, so in this case, now, what about since it aired? Has there been any updates or news stories about it in Baltimore? Because it's getting press now. I mean, on a global scale.
Well, actually, Marie Claire, I believe, yeah, Marie Claire did like 3 or 4 follow-up
Yeah.
articles on it. And one of the things, and I'm just looking at my laptop here. One of the things they covered here is his laptop. It disappeared from the police station. So you have some of these things that kind of pop up. And then the other story was they talk about the note theory.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, the note's weird.
the note is weird, but
Yeah.
he was interested in being a screenwriter, right? So don't forget,
Exactly.
he had a love of the movies, and then he made a list of the movies in the letter that was taped behind his computer. And why was it taped there? Why didn't he just keep it out in the open?
Yeah.
And then the co-creator of Unsolved Mysteries talked about a theory about how one of the movies that he had listed in that note behind his computer that was taped to the back of his computer, the death scene was very similar to how he died in the real life situation. He falls through the ceiling. In this one movie, he falls, through the ceiling, and it basically has those two deaths are very similar. Now, is it purposeful? We just don't know, because it just raises more questions, but it does make it very mysterious. And then around that time, Ray Rivera was also really wanted to get into the Freemasons. So why would that interested him? Again, he's interested in being a screenwriter, and we often hear about the Illuminati and the Freemasons with movie stars, right? So maybe it was just something coincidental, but again, it raises questions. It doesn't really give any concrete answers, but it does make his story so mysterious. I think the way he died, it's the greatest mystery of all. And the fact that he was in there for so long, which really did a number on the evidence they could gather. Now, if the police were pushing it to closure, right, and saying that it was a suicide, even though logistically it would have been very hard for him to do that as a suicide, their collection of evidence, was there something behind their collection of evidence that made the case weaker, that wouldn't drive it to closure? We just don't know.
Yeah, interesting. We're talking about the Freemasonry, the Freemason stuff, and the Illuminati. About, say, probably 3 months ago, I received an email on Instagram asking if I was interested in joining the Illuminati, so they could get me in. Have you ever gotten one of those emails?
No, not on Instagram. I actually check out the people who follow me, and if they have like these weird usernames and they only have like 3 posts, or if they have like a top, 9 posts about Bitcoin, I'll block them. I'm just
it's probably a safe move there.
Right.
I think I'm overly entertained by that stuff, and I didn't write him back. I didn't get back to him. I was busy. So I was like, I don't have time to be in the Illuminati right now. I got because to me that seems like that would be a time commitment. Am I wrong, or am I wrong? There'd be
I think it would be a time commitment. They're asking you to join a club, essentially. So you're going to join a club. You have to participate in the club to get stature. You have to pay some sort of dues. And I'm just talking about clubs or volunteering, right? You're going to have to pay your dues. You're going to have to network, build your network. All of that takes time.
Yeah, it was just such a commitment. I mean, I didn't even really follow through too much when I was doing meetup groups. I would show up for a couple of them, and then I would bail after that. So I mean, to do a full on Illuminati commitment is a lot. So I didn't get back to him. I'm sorry I ghosted on you, whoever user 197893. I'm sorry I ghosted on you. I hope everything's going well for you. I send you the best. Uh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's yeah.
On this letter, the letter was really weird because it had, it referenced the Freemason stuff in the Rivera case. It could be, like you said, it could be as much. And I went there too. He's a screenwriter. I know writers will sit down and it's kind of like a musician that sits there and just sort of kind of like with their whatever instrument they play and just sort of fiddles around and trying to look at like try different things as far as sounds. I know as a faux writer myself, I'll sit down sometimes and just jot notes down. Artists do it. Artists will sit down and they'll just play around and sketch stuff, and sometimes they get something brilliant by sitting there and just goofing around, and same with musicians. So, he might have had aspirations to write a script about that world,
Hmm. Hmm.
and you go down that wormhole. I know I'll go down some weird wormholes sometimes and get really obsessed and interested in one topic, and I'll try to learn everything there is about this one topic, even though it's something that I have no interest in participating in or partaking in. I'll become really interested in the information, and I think it could have been that too. So the weird thing is that it could have had a minimal connection, but I really honestly my hunch is there's foul play though in this case. It's not the suicide. I really think there was foul play.
Well, let's look at some of the evidence. They spent a lot of time talking about him jumping from the top of the Belvedere, and it's just, he would have to like run, and then it just logistically it was
Yeah.
impossible. And then the only other option was the garage,
Yeah.
him running and jumping. And then they talked about certain pieces of evidence like his glasses and his phone and
Mhm.
his wallet, and then the wallet clip was missing.
Yeah.
So who took his wallet clip? I mean, to me that would be a souvenir. I mean, we watch enough of these news stories, right? These murder mysteries, we become self-proclaimed experts. So, was that a souvenir? Like, did he?
Yeah.
It seemed like he found out something, and this goes with a theory his wife had, and maybe Jane Miller from, News 11, is that he found out something that he shouldn't have,
Yeah.
and maybe that he got confronted with it, and it became a threat to him and his family.
Yeah. Yeah, there was some weirdness going on. There was their security alarm that was set off a couple of times that week, um,
Hmm.
at their house, and so yeah, and then the whole thing with the hard drive, the computer, and the mystery behind that as well. So I think so too. I think there was something that he found out or seen, and someplace something he wasn't supposed to see. I really hope that I'm never that guy guy that sees something I'm not supposed to see. Because, I mean, that's the terrible lottery when you win that lottery. You
Hmm.
see something or you're around something and you're not supposed to be around.
And
So,
the other thing that struck me when I watched it again was his shins. His shins were broken in. I think one or two
mm,
of them both were. So if he's trying to catapult himself to his death, he can't do it before. And it's possible he could break his legs, due to the impact. But
mhm,
I, it just really kind of struck me as off. Something hit my gut in a way, and I just noticed it as a detail that just seemed inconsistent with how he was in his last place, right,
yeah,
in the conference room. And it was protruding from the bone, and I don't know, it just struck me as being very odd.
yeah, yeah, it definitely is. Well, I know, like, you watching it are looking forward to some when they start to do follow-ups on some of these cases because 'cause they're getting a lot of tips. Um, some of those cases, a few here and there will get solved, I think. They'll
Hmm.
have some, or new information will at least come to the surface because of all the tips they're getting, on Unsolved Mysteries. Okay,
Hmm.
another big doc this year on 2020 on the, Netflix was The Social Dilemma, and, much different topic, than Unsolved Mysteries, although there are some unsolved mysteries involved in the content that was tackled in The Social Dilemma. But, Social Dilemma, well, it dives in to the I would say the dark side of social media and how the algorithms are being used to manipulate people and trying to get them to spend more time, much more time, as much time as possible with their eyeballs on these social media platforms. And first of all, one thing before I go any further into it, I do want to say this. We're not where we're at right now doing what we're doing if not for these platforms.
I'm looking at my phone
Yeah,
right now.
I'm on tonight. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the people we're about to talk about. And they have there's some good things that have come along from these social media platforms. There are many good things. It has given people creative people, artists, musicians, a place to directly find an audience and distribute their stuff. And they can leapfrog over where you used to have a producer or someone in Hollywood or someone at a big record label if you wanted to get in front of an audience of, you know, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but we just had a TikTok video. I had a TikTok video that got 1.1 million views, and that doesn't happen if not for social media platforms. I mean, that shows you the power of social media platforms and what they have given people. The good thing they've given people a place, a way to distribute their ideas, their information, their talents, their creativity, generating revenue for themselves, empowering themselves in so many different ways. So there's the good side of social media. It's also reunited, and they mentioned this in the documentary also, how it's reunited families that couldn't find a long lost family member. So there's been those things. It keeps you connected to people that you wouldn't necessarily wouldn't necessarily have been connected to. But then on the other end of it, they dive into a lot of the dark stuff. What are your initial thoughts about after watching it? What do you think?
I think they hit the nail on the head. I mean, they basically study technology design and psychology. They married the two, and it's absolutely to make you stay on the platforms as long as possible and to make it addictive. I mean, just this week, Twitter rolled out stories, right?
Oh, I did not know this. I did not know that Twitter has stories now.
They rolled out stories. So I
Yeah.
commented on Facebook yesterday. I was like, when will this insanity end? They just rolled out stories.
There's the poaching of like what other, because now, I mean, Instagram has the Reels, which is basically their version of TikTok.
That's true. I haven't gotten on TikTok yet though, because I don't want essentially it's a very huge security concern. And you think about the age group and why is China collecting that data? I mean, that's a lot of information about a generation within our country they're collecting data on. They can study the psychology. I mean, they could totally do a psyop on us that we would have no control over. I mean, they could harvest that data and use it, and we just don't know what for.
Yeah, and they get into that in this documentary. They get into it. They don't really get into TikTok specifically that much. It's I think briefly referenced, but they really get into Facebook heavy, Twitter. I don't know if Instagram kind of goes under the umbrella of Facebook since they're the same company. I don't know if they really get YouTube. YouTube is covered obviously quite a bit in the doc as well. The three big giants of social media, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, are covered heavily in the doc. Although some people argue that maybe now Instagram is bigger than Facebook. But yeah, they go in and they go into how the wormhole in different ways that people can get caught up in this web. And they do reenactments. They've got these actors. They're doing a reenactment of showing how it's affecting this family. It's really good through most of the doc for me. Towards the end, I thought it got a little bit overly like dramatic in terms of the reenactment and how it was portrayed. But it's still very good the way they did it. How they had the reenactment with the actors and showing how it affects his family and how it became addicting to the kids in different ways. And they couldn't not look at their phones and look at their notifications. Is it changing the way you approach social media? Because you, to me, I get you. I get the perception that you're a person that participates in social media, but you try to be responsible about it.
I certainly do, but I downloaded an app to, stay focused, and it tracks your usage, and it's actually
Oh, yeah.
obscene how much time you can end up on your phone. I mean, think about it. You work throughout the day, and so let's say you check your phone in between meetings. You
Mhm.
could end up checking your phone like 30 times and end up spending 2 hours on your phone over a work day.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, so it just adds up really quick.
Yeah.
You might open up Instagram like 50 times in a day, and that might be a low amount. So I think people just really don't think consciously about how they use their phone. And I do try to be responsible. Like, here I am interacting with you on my phone. But
Mhm.
I mean, there's plenty of times at night, I get into that Insta scroll, right? Or I get into the Facebook and I'm scrolling,
Yeah.
or I'm flipping in between platforms. You just get bored. You're not interested in TV. TV is
Yeah.
just not as engaging. And think about it. We're in the middle of COVID. People
Yeah.
want and need connection. And so I think if people are doing extra time on social media, we need
Yeah.
to give ourselves a break, not from media, but just not feel so bad for using it, because we need that connection. And if we're staying home, I can reach out and send you a message, and even you can never beat face to face time, right?
No.
But we need that right now as a coping tool. So I think we need to be a little more gentler on ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it brings out, I was talking about trolls earlier. Social media brings out a unbelievable, like, I guess, anger. I think it's more anger. People have this pent up anger, and then it's a way for them to get it out. And just like people that have this pent up creativity, on the good end of things, social media has allowed them to get their express themselves and get their creativity out. Well, people that have a lot of pent up anger, some things, because because when someone posts something mean about someone on social media, to me, it's not. It's more about themselves, it's about the person. Not to play armchair psychologist here, but it seems to me it's more about the cyberbullying is more about the person than the person they're targeting.
Well,
Anything
and
else?
think of, and I think they did, you know, when you think about what's going on in the country right now and how they depicted that extreme kind of group in the documentary, I think they're very right. I mean, there are extreme groups using these platforms,
Yeah,
and so Facebook is censoring it, and I've seen good actors get censored. You
yeah,
know, um, like ketogenic diets. I've followed that lifestyle, not actively right now, but I still follow a lot of those pages,
yeah,
and at least two of the accounts I've followed have been once been deactivated and once been shadow banned, and these people don't post anything controversial at all.
mhm,
And so, I think
wow,
what we see happening
yeah,
is Instagram and Facebook are trying out new algorithms.
yeah,
Since that documentary, I've thought about it. I'm like, they're probably trying out new algorithms where they can target more extreme groups or actors
it
on these
just
platforms. And I think some of the good actors are just getting wiped out.
and they're kind of getting caught in it because the web is thrown out further to try to get more of the crap. So a few good ones are being kind of swept up in there as well because the web is being thrown out further. Is that what you're kind of saying? More or less?
Well, I mean, I honestly don't know why these pages have had what they had happen to them. I mean, one of them is, a guy that he's called Gourmet Goes Keto,
Mhm,
and he posts about keto products, and
yeah,
he talks about how he's lost, like 400 plus pounds. He shows weight loss stories. He's not going out preaching about how other diets are bad. He's not pretending to be an armchair scientist. He just
yeah,
shows results and facts.
gotcha.
And so he's endorsing products and then showing weight loss pictures. So it just kind of struck me as strange that he would be disabled. And the only thing I could think of is, they're probably, some of these platforms are trying out new algorithms to take out bad actors or shadow ban them or reduce their exposure to people,
Mhm.
kind of cloister them in a small little echo chamber.
Yeah.
And I think some people are just going to fall by the wayside because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I could see
Hmm.
that happening for sure.
Hmm.
Um, now Mark Zuckerberg has not seen the doc, and also the head of Twitter apparently have not watched the doc yet. Although Facebook did come up with an official statement following up after the documentary came out that was defending their platform. And
Hmm.
I will say this: Netflix that distributes this documentary, they use a little bit of these tricks themselves. I mean, they're using a little bit of the tricks themselves, so they're not, completely exempt, and they're not mentioned in the documentary as a
True.
culprit, but they use that same kind of algorithm, technique to show you other things that you might enjoy watching after you watch one, which is very much like YouTube, but it's long form content rather than short form content, which is mostly what YouTube is going to be, you know, 8 minutes to 20-minute videos that you usually watch on there, but Netflix, of course, being more feature length and series and stuff like that. But they use that algorithm too on Netflix. So I mean, it's there, and that's acknowledging that it works, and um that it's successful for them. They're well, and these new streaming platforms like Disney Plus that are a little bit newer are adapting to that as well. So it's very interesting.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so some of the employees of Twitter that appeared in this documentary. There's one gentleman in specific that was in the documentary quite a bit that's been in the news since the documentary came out. His name's right now. I don't have his name in front of me, but some of these former employees from Twitter, Facebook, Google that appear in this documentary, they pretty much have decided by being outspoken about this that they're never going to work in this industry ever again. Would you agree?
Well, who knows? They could go work for Netflix. They can go work for Hulu. They can go work for Disney.
Mhm.
I mean, media, especially now, is very strong. So there's tons of companies these guys can go to.
Yeah,
So I don't, maybe they'll never work at Google and Twitter again, but they're very technically smart. They know the market,
yeah,
they're
true.
experts. Now, Tristan formed that institute that's more
Yeah,
about ethical programming,
right.
right? Or ethical algorithms.
Yeah,
These guys probably do consulting. They probably
yeah,
charge by the hour obscene amounts of money. I mean, we just don't know what these guys are doing.
right.
But I'm assuming they probably have no shortage of employment. And one of the guys was talking about how he was very nervous and he kept going back and forth with legal.
Mhm.
So there is probably a lot left out that we didn't fully see.
There's book deals, speaking engagements, like you said, consulting. I knew you would catch that ball when I threw it your way. I was just wanting you to
Yeah,
be the one to deliver that.
I just caught it.
Yeah, I had faith. I knew you were going to catch that
Yeah,
perfectly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, think about it. You're going on TV and you're on a major platform,
Mhm,
and Netflix is a major platform that
mhm.
probably has some sort of agreements with some of these companies.
Yeah.
So there are going to be certain things they say and don't say.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. There's going to be, because they have lawyers and stuff that are advising them. And
Hmm.
yeah, I give kudos to them and what they did. They're fighting the good fight out there. Like I said, I think there's a lot of good for these social media platforms that can be done. Um, I think the utopia version of it is possible and not the dystopia version. The dystopia version is very possible too, but I do think there is a utopia version of it. So,
uh,
what do you think?
I,
Do you think am I wrong or am I wrong for that? Am I
I
being
want a
overly
little bit
optimistic?
of both because I think dystopia is like a hellacious nightmare, and then utopia is just too good to be true. You come in and you
Well,
knock on
yeah,
the plastic tree and you wonder if things are real or not. So
it, yeah,
I'd like to see a little bit of both. Um,
yeah, because the utopia can be a little creepy if it's overdone, right?
yes, yes.
Almost as bad in a different kind of bad way as than the dystopia part of it. That part of it, something kind
I,
of in the
I,
middle.
I think it'd be worse.
It could be worse. Yeah, you might be right. You might be right, depending on the outlook of that.
Think
This was
about
the what's that?
I was just gonna say, it's like going to heaven. You get to the movie library, and every movie is a remake.
Yeah. There you go, right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've seen this, right? Let me share this with you. This is the 1984 Apple Macintosh commercial. This is the dystopia version. Face shields, man.
Mm.
That's kind of eerie now, seeing face shields.
Yeah, but then they have the Olympian athlete running in. She's not wearing a bra, typical 80s.
Yeah.
And she's rescuing all of these grays.
Yeah, with their bright colors and the red running shorts, and like you said, the very 80s vibe. So yeah, it's there. And that was the year 84 was the year of the 84 Olympics, which was in Los Angeles. So that was a big year for the US hosting the Olympics. So that was kind of a little nod. I would assume there was a little nod to that back in 84. So okay, I still had some of the sound coming in. I could turn that off. Okay. So yeah, so that big documentary year. I can't imagine how they're going to follow up these documentaries in 2021, like what Netflix has in store for us, but they've proven themselves to be the king of docs right now, of great docs. And we didn't even get into Cuties, which was definitely the most controversial. We should probably come back and do a follow-up where we talk about that, because that was very controversial, and I know you've got some thoughts on that too. So I'd love to cover that sometime coming up in the future, if you'd come back to do that, if we haven't scared you off.
No, I'd love to come back. You and I have known each other. We met on a social media platform.
Yes.
And I think, hey, we're not going anywhere for a while. Let's do this again.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because I was talking about the social media platforms, and these media platforms have to make money so that for them to survive. And a good example of that is you're talking about MySpace. Back in the MySpace days, and MySpace was there before Facebook, and Friendster before MySpace. Of course, everybody remembers Tom with his goofy smile and the white T-shirt. It was like something like that. I miss Tom, by the way. Tom was so like, he had a smile and kind of like was just sort of the lovable IT guy, like behind the social media platform, and it just seemed there was the simpler times of social media, the MySpace days, when everybody had their customized backgrounds on their profile with their bedazzled pages and their custom letters. But anyway, that MySpace doesn't survive because they don't figure out a way to make it a viable, profitable, platform. And these platforms are trying to figure out ways to survive, and they cover that in the doc as well, on how they're just trying to survive by having revenue and stuff like that. Okay. So we're going to get into agree or disagree on this unnumbered episode of this podcast. It's 130 something. I know that. We're going to get into the agree disagree, and I've got my show notes here, and I'm going to put a little agree or disagree music on the background. Here we go. Number one, we'll get into some fun stuff. You ever heard of the Pink Panther? You know the Pink Panther? Okay. Pink Panther is going to be rebooted yet again. Now, Steve Martin did a live action reboot of it with Beyonce, I think back in 2007, I believe. And they did a song, and the movie did okay. I think it did marginally well. I don't think it was a big hit. They're going to do it again. I was thinking about this the other day because it was announced, I think, about a month ago. They're going to do Buck Rogers again also. And Buck Rogers is like retro sci-fi. Okay. It's old school sci-fi. I mean, it's sci-fi before Star Trek. I mean, it goes back really far. They did a live action of it in the 80s. And then since then, there hasn't really been anything big done with Buck Rogers. They're doing that again. Tom and Jerry there's a new Tom and Jerry. There's also a new Bugs show on HBO Max. And that's been kind of weird because they brought Bugs Bunny back and they couldn't do the gun anymore for Elmer Fudd because the gun in
Hmm.
the cartoon in 2020 wasn't going to work. So they replaced it. He's got like a machete now. So he chased, I guess apparently he haven't seen it, but apparently he chases Bugs Bunny around one with a machete. And to me, that's way more creepier than the hunter with the
Yeah.
rifle. That guy, dude, running in the woods with a
Why don't
machete.
they give him a paint gun, like a
That's
paintball gun, or a
exactly.
water gun? Give him a water gun.
Yeah, I mean it's Elmer Fudd. You give him a silly water gun, it's hilarious.
Or he could set up traps like Wile E.
Yeah,
Coyote.
yeah.
I don't like the machete.
They've turned him into a psychopath running in the
Well,
woods.
it's like being in Britain. There's no guns in Britain, so you have a lot of crimes involved with knives.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. It's kind of the same way of thinking. So here's my question for you, and agree or disagree. The first question: do some IPs, intellectual properties, are they just too old to be rebooted? Like, do they become too dated? Because when they try to bring it in and modernize it, I'll give you an example. A regular on our show, Jazz One, when Arsenio Hall came back and did a new version of his show, he said it was really hard for me to watch him do a show where he's talking about Twitter handles. I'm so used to his 90s show, and then you bring him back and it's him, but he's doing like, here's our Twitter feed kind of stuff. It just was weird for me. Are
Hmm.
some stuff just too dated, like a Buck Rogers or Pink Panther, to where it's really like, as the saying goes, it's beating a dead horse?
I would agree with that.
Mhm. And would you agree that maybe Pink Panther, which we love the old Pink Panther show, but would you agree that that may be one of those that maybe they tried it a few years ago, it didn't do too great, and they're trying to do it again? Do you think it might be one of those types of stories that maybe it's too dated to do it again?
I would agree. I mean, you can think about certain shows like Star Trek. They've been able to evolve it.
Yeah,
Even Star
some things
Wars.
can.
Hmm.
Star Wars too, yeah.
Yeah. I just think certain things can't be evolved. Ultraman. Have you ever seen Ultraman?
I'm familiar with Ultraman. Yeah,
I mean, all of the effects they do in there is like precursor to Star Trek in the 60s.
yeah,
Um, but they've evolved it over a number of years. So I think
yeah,
certain brands do age, and if you don't touch it, I mean, like, think about Star Trek. They didn't touch it in between the 70s, but they brought it back soon enough they were able to evolve it. And if you leave certain things alone too long, like maybe Pink Panther, it doesn't make sense. But with James Bond, they kept doing movies, even in the 80s and the 90s when they sort of had crappy James Bond
yeah.
storylines. It still kept the brand going, and so now you have Daniel Craig,
Mhm.
and that classiness is brought back. People will accept it.
Yeah, and there's a certain, I mean, shows like Cobra Kai have proven that if you do nostalgia right, I mean, there is a window where you can come back with something and do something with it and use the nostalgia to your benefit. And then there's a point where, I mean, like, come on, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, Cobra Kai is probably going to be Karate Kid. Doing that again is probably going to be dated. But right now, is certainly there's a window where it works. Star Trek, there are some that can probably go on many more times for many more years. Star Trek, they've done a lot of it is the execution too, but Star Trek was a great example. They've done a good job of modernizing and reinventing it and figuring out ways to make it still for a younger audience. Star Wars has worked really well. James Bond has worked really well, and being able to do those again and continue to do updates and revitalizations of it for a
Hmm.
while. Batman is probably the best example. Batman works probably better now than it did in the 60s because you could bring in all the gadgets and technology.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
makes it more, for me, it makes it more believable when you do a Batman in 2020 than when it was done in the 60s, because a lot of the technology is a little bit more believable for the audience.
Well, and I think we're ready for Idris Elba to be Batman, right? I'm not
Yeah.
sure about James Patterson or
Oh,
Patterson. Can we
yeah.
please Can we please have Idris Elba as Batman? He would make a great Batman. I don't know why they didn't do it yet, but we're ready for something like that culturally. We're hungry for it.
Yeah.
And Hollywood, I guess, is just stubborn as can be. They didn't do it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's still, there's still, a long way to go in terms of progress being made. I actually like him for James Bond. And
I thought that too.
The Batman thing's kind of cool, but the James Bond, I think he should be the next James Bond. Absolutely,
He should be.
Absolutely the next James Bond. I think he would fit that perfectly. I think it would do really well. I think he would be. I think he was born for the role to take over for Daniel Craig. I worry that they're not considering it seriously, but I think he'd be perfect in that part. And the Batman would be cool too. But I think if you do James Bond first and foremost, for sure.
Well, I think it's going to be hard to do James Bond because Daniel Craig and Idris Elba are both same age range. So it's not like Idris can inherit it. So we have to look at who's younger and up and coming to take on that role.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could do it unless figure out a way to write that in to make it work in the story.
Mhm.
But it would be kind of fun to see. Number 2, speaking of Star Trek. This is cool. So another really good actor Anson Mount. Now, Anson Mount plays the current Captain Pike on the newer Star Treks. Okay, so he is very good, by the way, as Captain Pike. He's brought that role to life. And right now, I'm watching the new Star Trek Discovery, where I'm almost done with the second season. To me, he's one of the coolest captains that ever in the history of Star Trek. Yeah, and I like season 1 because it had some mystery and some creepy elements to it. But season 2, he's been a standout for sure. Okay, so he has accepted an invite to join an organization called METI, which is a messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. And their goal is making contact with extraterrestrial life. Okay. Now, here's my question for you. Do you agree or disagree? And I'm not going to ask you if you agree or disagree aliens exist. I won't put that kind of pressure on you the first time on our show. But what I will ask you is, there's some scientists who actually have said, high-profile scientists have said publicly, there's been some, and not all of them, but there have been some that said, we really shouldn't be trying to find aliens too hard because we might find something that maybe we don't want to find and we'll regret it. Now, I've actually read scientists that have said basically that in so many words. Do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I agree with that.
We shouldn't be messing with it. Yeah. Why do you
Yeah.
think that?
Well, I think we kind of think of ourselves in too much of an ego way. And so what I mean by that is, here we are, we have kind of like caveman-like technologies. If you think about extraterrestrials and their capability to come find us, we've got guns with bullets. Who knows? They could have lasers, and these lasers could be like worse than nuclear bombs. So we don't really know what we're getting into. It's like opening Pandora's box.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if somebody else does the research and the legwork, I nerd out on the information. I'm not the one that's going to go in and try to be the finder of the information. But if someone else digs it up, I'll definitely read it. But yeah, so there's that. It's interesting that you would say, so you're out on it. Say you would definitely agree on it. Okay, number 3. There's now a Comic-Con Hall of Fame, and they've just inducted their second person to be entered in the Comic-Con Hall of Fame. So obviously, this is going to be all things nerdy. That's going to be put into this this new Hall of Fame museum. They have a big presentation. It's much like just like they do with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Of course, it's all being done virtually right now. But the second inductee into the Comic-Con Hall of Fame is Pac-Man. Do you agree or disagree with that choice? Because this is like your second inductee. So if you're going like if this was the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I mean, you would start with the legends, right? You would start with you know, the James Brown, the Little Richard, the Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Jimi Hendrix. But for the Comic-Con, for the Nerdy Hall of Fame, do you think Pac-Man? Do you agree or disagree with that choice?
Who was the first one?
I tried to find that and I couldn't find it. I was researching that today, and if I had dug a little deeper, I could have found it. Let me see if I can find that right now. Let's see, Comic-Con. Keep
I'll
talking.
still give you my answer as you find that, but
Well, you're right. That does make a significant impact. I think it could affect perception. Okay, Comic-Con Hall of Fame International. They gave the first. Okay. Well, there's a list of people that were like founders of Comic-Con that I think are being recognized in the Hall of Fame. But let me see here, Comic-Con Hall. There's also award recipients, so that's coming up too. But who actually is in that award before Pac-Man? I'm not finding right now. Who would you have put as the first one?
It depends, because it depends on how far you want to go back. But I would say I would kick it off with a bang. Let's do Wolverine.
Yeah, I'm going Stan Lee for me as my all-star team, and I would also go with there's so many. George Lucas, obviously, you'd have to put. He invented Star Wars. The creator of Star Trek would be on that list for me, but it depends on what the criteria is to get in this. But right now, on Pac-Man, do you agree or disagree with that choice?
I disagree.
Yeah, you think it's too soon for Pac-Man? Is that like putting? And no insult, because I love Pac-Man, but was that like literally putting the Goo Goo Dolls as the second recipient of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No.
It's not that bad.
I think Pac-Man is an icon, right? But
Yeah,
I would look at things that have gone back further in history. I mean, you have Wonder Woman. The impact she had during World War II. You have Captain America, the impact he had. You had like Superman posters saying, diversity is an American thing, like back in the 50s. So I think we could look at some of these other icons and bring them in. I'm not sure what was the reasoning behind Pac-Man.
Yeah, I'll look into it. I'll get back with you on what their reasoning was on that.
I'll just have to come on the show and you can report to me.
We'll do a follow-up on that for sure. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, to close out the show, this unnumbered episode, because I don't remember, but I think it's like 130 something. I'm losing track. It doesn't matter anymore, does it? It doesn't matter. Okay, here it is. Thoughts and advice. So I'm drinking some green tea tonight to help keep me lively for this live stream. Get it? Lively for this live stream. Okay, so where's my laughter for that? It's a cheesy sound effect. Anyway, okay. Here's my thought and advice. I'm kind of mad right now. I was in what I thought was a committed relationship with my favorite energy drink for several years now. I was really into the Guaki Yerba Mate energy shots. I drank them for several years, and that was my coffee. I rarely drank coffee. I was usually a little bit of tea, and then my when I really needed the boost, it was the Guaki Yerba Mate shots. And they originally had it in two flavors. They had a lime version, which I wasn't as crazy about, and then they had a chocolate cherry version, and that was my jam. Chocolate cherry version. They stopped making my favorite flavor, but I adapted because they introduced a wild berry version, which was okay. And it had healthy stuff in it. It had caffeine, but it had like reishi mushrooms and cool stuff like that. So nothing else did it for me. Like coffee, too much of a crash. Tea, sometimes I needed a little bit more than what I could get just from a green tea. Okay. The yerba mate, Guaki Yerba Mate shots. I'm calling you out, Guaki Yerba Mate. We were in a committed relationship for multiple years, what I thought was a committed relationship, and you didn't communicate with me that you weren't in it for the long haul, and you bailed. You're ghosting on me because you stopped making my Guaki Yerba Mate energy shots, and I'm very sad about this. So my thought and advice is that I need some explaining from Guaki Yerba Mate on why you stopped making my favorite energy shot, because in the post relationship, I've not been doing well. I've been feeling the withdrawal, and I'm trying different things, but the only other thing that gives me the same boost that I've tried so far, and it's not, and I don't want to, it's a brand, so maybe I shouldn't call them out, but Red Bull gives me the same boost. Some people love Red Bull. Some would say it's not the healthiest drink because of the sugar. So I think that's fair to make that assessment. I probably would like something with less sugar, and I don't want artificial sugar either. So I'm trying some different things, but nothing's quite working. I'm doing amazingly well tonight, though, because I've been struggling, especially in the evenings. I've been struggling because of the caffeine withdrawal. I've not quite found anything. I heard about something tonight. It's another energy drink. It's got cherry. It's unsweetened. It's got cherries in it. Do you have any recommendations for me? But my thought and advice is I need some explanation from Guaki on why they stopped making this energy shot. What should I do, Laura?
Oh my God. I don't know. I'm a coffee drinker. I can drink a pot of coffee.
Just drink a pot of coffee and then call it. It's first world problems. Just shut up and drink a pot of coffee.
Or you could get one of those. You can get one of those like percolators, and you can make little shorter coffee drinks, kind of like a shot of coffee. Or you could buy yerba mate in tea bags and drink it in your tea.
Like a concentrated yerba mate, like make concentrated yerba mate. Like tea.
Well, you could actually get loose tea leaves and put it in a little one of those little spoons that has a cover on the top and the bottom and the little perforated holes, and then you can just put it in your cup and pour the boiling water in.
I'll try it. I was hoping for some words of wisdom and some good advice, and I think you provided it.
Thank you.
Couple of people I'm going to bring in and just show. So we had some very nice people that joined us throughout our podcast tonight. Victoria said, "I love your background, Presley. Just checking in to see what you're doing." Hey, thank you, Victoria. Thanks for popping in and checking out what we're doing. We had also Maureen back in. She said, "Oh my God, they need to leave Elmer Fudd alone." Maureen said Batman got darker too. You're right. It was not just about the technological things that they brought in to Gotham, to the Batman story, but they also brought in a lot of they made it more, darker tone. And that's been going on since the Tim Burton version. That was kind of the start of that, with them making it a darker kind of. Are you a fan of the Batmans?
I love Batman. I mean, I kind of lost the rhythm though in the 2000s with Christian Bale, but I liked it.
You did not like it?
No, I did like it. I kind of lost the rhythm though, because I like the Tim Burton ones the best.
Oh yeah. Well, I think the Tim Burtons were the most artistic, and visually the most artistic. And I mean, how can you go wrong with Michael Keaton? Michael Keaton, I know, just likable in everything he does. Whether he's playing even his villains are compelling, and you want to watch what he's doing as he's playing a villain. So yeah, love Keaton. Of course, Jack Nicholson, of course, and as the Joker in the first one was great. What's that?
And then Prince did the whole soundtrack. I mean,
Prince, yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, how can you go wrong with Prince? It's and our friend Jazz One, who's a huge Prince fan, said that they should have had Prince music in every Batman movie after that. From that point on, it should have always been Prince music. And I don't necessarily think he's wrong. I could get with that. Maureen Joseph thought it was funny because I referenced the Goo Goo Dolls, which I think may be the first time in the history of our show that I've ever referenced the Goo Goo Dolls. Possibly Nickelback has been brought in once in some capacity, but I don't think we've ever had reference that. She's over on Facebook tonight. And Yeah. And Maureen was like, "You've got no closure," she said, in reference to the energy shot rant
Yeah.
that I went on. Well, okay, it's time to wrap it up. Any final thoughts from you, Laura, tonight?
No, I really enjoyed coming on tonight and would certainly love to again.
Oh, we'd love to have you back in the Thunder Pop Dome. And thank you everybody that joined us. And if I missed anyone earlier, we had a lot of comments tonight, so I didn't get everybody in. And mainly the reason why I didn't get everybody in is because I can't figure out how to go back on the scroll to find them all. Oh yeah, I found some more. Let me see if I missed anyone. Oh yeah, there was Dark Seed on Twitch tonight, Dark Seed 346, and I'm worried if this is the same person that invited me to join the Illuminati. I hope they're not like they're not mad that I mentioned that on the air. But no, anyway, thank you for joining us too. They were talking about they try to make everything so cheery and all, which is stupid because life isn't all cheery. They try to make everything so cheery and all, which is stupid because life isn't all cheery. So that was Dark Seed. Oh, and then in the reference to the cuties, it's the worst. So we'll have to cover that. We'll have to do a follow up and cover that because we didn't get into that. And I'd like to hear your takes on that and what you thought about it as well. It's going to spiral downwards the next decade, honestly. Okay. On that note, everyone, we certainly hope not. Certainly hope not. Okay, everyone, have a great Laura. Thank you so much for joining us. It was excellent having you in. So much fun talking to you tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Everyone out there, as we always say, have a great day, second, millisecond. Goodbye. And it's time for our fun closeout. It's here somewhere. Okay, I'm going to keep talking until we get it. It's here. It's here. Okay, everyone, have a good night. Thank you. Thunder Pop is a Hit the Bricks production.